What is going on, Sports Wars? We're here and we are live for some Wednesday evening against the spread. It's been a few weeks since we all been together. We had Thanksgiving, we had a couple things, but now we're back and we're ready to rock and roll. Week 14 of the NFL, and we certainly saw some interesting results week 13, including the return of Deshaun Watson. And of course, week 13 was also the last real college football weekend that we're going to have until we get into bowl season. So lots of good stuff to talk about for this upcoming week. We're always joined by Robert Barnes from sportspicks.locals.com. What's up, Robert?
Yeah, it was an interesting week. I had the bad beat was really the Texans at home. They were playing well, and Cleveland managed to score by every means possible other than offensively to cover the spread. So it was one of those kind of games where, Texans found ways to lose in Deshaun Watson's homecoming to Houston. But I think it's, we got Heisman betting that's out there now. We got the bowl season. The games are all matched up. We got the playoffs and who should be in and who should be out is resolved because some teams are in and some teams are out. And we had a fun last weekend of conference championships that created some eventful who would be in and out on that following Sunday. And the NFL continues to be a week in, week out interesting week as San Francisco went from being a Super Bowl favorite to who are they going to have as quarterback number 3. A lot of stuff to talk about and discuss in the upcoming week.
Yeah, I think the return of Deshaun Watson, they were really bailed out by the rest of that team by just how bad the Texans are, because Deshaun Watson looked rusty. He looked like garbage. It looked like he could have used a massage to loosen him up a little bit before the game, all right? Looked a little tight, that's all I'm saying. But we will get into that. We've also got Cricket. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's going on, man? How you doing, man? Glad to see you guys again. It's been a couple weeks, but I believe my bad beat last week, man, was I had the under in the 49ers and Dolphins game. They're under 45.5. They're sitting right there at 43 and wound up getting the sack, fumble, scoop, and score toward the end of the game to get it over. So that was my tough one. And then I had Purdue, man. Purdue, too, plus 16.5. Michigan kind of nil on it right there at the end and winds up punching it in for a meaningless touchdown right at the end to get the cover. So, but Mama said there would be days like this.
Yeah, that's true. And my Boilers, hey, they hung in the first half. They couldn't quite get it done in the second. What are you going to do? And actually, their head coach is now gone. He's heading to Louisville, which I thought was a little bit interesting. So we'll see what he does there. We'll see how the Purdue program reloads after Brahms had a couple good seasons there. I think a little bit disappointing at times with some of the games they've lost, but also some big wins that were pretty big wins for that organization or for that school. So we'll see how they replace him. And of course, we got Cody. What's up, man? How you doing?
Doing well. I was fortunate enough to not have a bad beat last week. So, but I had a big win there in the Eagles-Tennessee game over. Touchdown in the fourth quarter by the Eagles to seal that by a half point was good for me.
Man, no bad beats. Some people just live right, man.
Not every week, but this week was a good week.
Maybe they just all of them weren't even close, so it wasn't a bad beat. It was just a beat,
right? Yeah.
just a bad pick.
That's another option. That's another option that you can't have. So, all right, but we are gonna hop straight in to NFL, and I see Lulu in the chat. What's up, Lulu? Good to see you. We're gonna hop straight in to this NFL action. Thursday night football, man. Some of these Thursday games have been rough, to say the least. And we've got another one that I don't really know what to expect. I don't even know who's going to play quarterback for the LA Rams. Will it be Baker Mayfield, who they just picked up, who is studying the playbook on a plane? Maybe. But the Raiders are heading to LA to play the Rams.
Yeah, the Rams are at home. Raiders are 6.5-point road favorites, which is, a lot of disrespect for a potentially Baker Mayfield Rams. But it's reflective of the Rams' struggles this season. The 90% of the cash is on the Raiders. Almost 3/4 of the tickets are on the Raiders. Total at 43.5. Most of the public is betting same thing, 3/4 on the over. So they're thinking the Raiders' offensive explosiveness that we've witnessed occasionally throughout the season will continue in LA, and that the Rams defense won't step up to the plate. I would say that, I think I would lean a little bit towards the Rams on this. That's a lot of points for the Rams to be catching at home and for the Raiders to be favored by when they've, struggled to win any game this year. So I'd lean a little bit towards the Rams.
Yeah, you'd have been profitable riding home big home dogs all year long. But I just don't know enough about what's going to happen in this game with not knowing who's going to be playing at quarterback. I seriously doubt Mayfield plays, but if he does, it kind of changes things a little bit. So I'm going to wait and find out who that is before I touch anything on this game.
Yeah, the Rams, they got to be one of the most disappointing teams of this season, if not the most disappointing. Coming off the Super Bowl campaign, just really, really laying an egg this year. They had a lot of injuries and stuff. I mean, going to have a lot of injuries this week. Matthew Stafford's obviously on IR, like you guys said. Aaron Donald's not going to play. Cooper Kupp's not going to play again. And the Raiders are just kind of surging of late, man. But the key to the Raiders game is getting the run game going. They are 5-1 when Josh Jacobs rushes for over 100 yards. And, they look good when they get him rolling. So they got to get him rolling early and often to be able to really sustain drives and be able to stay in the game. Cool little tidbit, man. David Carr is only 20 yards away from 3,000 yards for his 9th time in 9 seasons. The only other 2 guys to do that are Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson. So something cool to watch for this weekend. But I like the Raiders in this game. I just, like you said, don't know enough about this Rams team. I like the Raiders minus 6.5. Anything under a touchdown right here, I think they're going to go handle business and take care of it and continue that rough season for the Rams.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs certainly been surging as of late, and they got a pretty good record when he goes over 100. They're actually undefeated this year when he rushes for over 200 yards. So, just feed that man the ball. Also, just want to put it out there, the Raiders are undefeated since Derek Carr cried on the podium, okay? And we all gave him shit for it. We all talked about how he cried there. I said, you know what? It's kind of embarrassing, but at least he cares about the team. Maybe there's something to that.
Hey, one more cool thing, man. Josh Jacobs is only 457 yards away from breaking Marcus Allen's all-time franchise record for single season that was set in 1985. So closing on that, something else to watch for in the coming weeks.
How many games they play in 85? 14?
Right.
Well, I think, seriousness, I think it was, right?
Yeah, it wasn't. It definitely was not 17. We know that much at least, and I don't think it was 16 yet either.
Because the 85 Bears went 14-0 regular season, right?
I think that's right.
Or no, sorry, 13-1. 13-1. They had one loss against the Dolphins, but I think it was the 14-game season. So yeah, all these records, man. That's the thing when you start changing these things around. All of a sudden, 5,000-yard pass season, 2,000-yard rush season, and it's just not as special as it was before.
Fair enough.
But that's the way of the world. But hey, no, Josh Jacobs on a contract year, I believe. Crazy that he's having a massive year.
About to get paid.
Yeah, absolutely. Now for the first Sunday games, the Jets who hung in tough with the Vikings, nearly won it in Minneapolis the other day. They're headed to another tough matchup with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, going to Buffalo. So this is always a game this time of year to check the weather. Buffalo favored by 9.5. The public's actually betting the Jets. They like the Jets. About 60% of the tickets are cashing in on the Jets. Total of 44. Public's leaning under, likely due to the weather factor in upstate New York this time of year. So they're predicting that the Bills win by something like 27-17. I think that's probably about right. It looks like the Bills have righted the ship for the most part. They're I think still an elite team competing for the playoff spot. This is a good place. And I don't think the Michael White magic will continue much longer. He was up and down. He had one good quarter basically against the Vikings. I think it's time for that to start to unravel. But I think the line is in the total is about where it should be.
I kind of like the Jets here. They've only been blown out twice early on. Game 1 against the Ravens and then again in week 3. But since then, they haven't lost by more than a touchdown to anybody. So, and they, went in and were able to beat the Bills at home earlier this year. I don't think they're going to win again, but I think they can keep it a little closer than 10.
Yeah, this could be a rematch of a game we see again in the playoffs, man. They're both right there around that in the seeds where it stands right now. And the Jets look good in that game early on, but I think the Bills really get some revenge right here. The Jets just couldn't punch it in last week. Michael White gave them some chances to in the red zone. They scored 1 touchdown in 6 trips to the red zone last week against the Vikings. Out of that big goal line stand right at the end of the game, only down less than a touchdown. So just couldn't punch in the end zone. I think the Bills' defense is far better than the Minnesota Vikings defense. I think they're going to be able to handle them in the red zone this week, and it's going to be really tough for the Jets to punch the ball in. So I'm going to take the Bills right here, minus 9.5, and I expect them to get some big revenge from that game earlier in the year.
You got to respect how this Jets team has played this year, especially the way it started. And Robert Saleh the entire time has been just jotting down who's been doubting them, keeping the receipts, and he's got that team playing inspired. And
Josh Allen played so terrible in that first game against the Jets, too. Probably his worst game of the year. Had 2 picks, no touchdowns. I mean, just did not look good. And I don't expect the same thing from him again. He usually doesn't do that two games in a row against the team. So he'll probably play much better.
Cam Newton Jr. from Cody. Ooh. I guess we'll see. Now we got the Browns, who finally got that Deshaun Watson game under their belt. They're headed to the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Bengals have certainly looked a lot better than they did, say, those first 4 or 5 games of the year. When it comes to sacks they're giving up, when it comes to that explosive offense, Jamar Chase came back at the perfect time as the offense had started clicking, and then you realize what happens when you put that afterburner in that offense. And Bengals coming off a great win against the Chiefs.
Yeah, they got the Chiefs number. So the Browns are 6-point dogs going into Cincinnati in this Ohio intrastate rivalry. 3/4 of the tickets are coming in on the Bengals as 6-point favorites. Total at 47. The public leans towards the under. Basically, they're predicting something like 26-20, 27-20, somewhere in that neighborhood score. I get Deshaun struggling in the first game back, and back against his rival in the first game in a couple of years. I don't know if he'll continue to struggle, though. Deshaun Watson's been an awfully good quarterback an awfully long time, and that offensive coordinator and head coaching staff has done pretty good with, frankly, lesser talent. So I think that I would lean towards the Browns here to keep it a little bit closer than Vegas likes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Watson's going to pick it up, and they still got Chubb, who's the best rusher in the league right now. He's an absolute beast. So, yeah, I like Browns in the 6 points here.
Yeah, man. Joe Burrow is 0-4 in his career against the Browns, and the Browns have actually dominated this series of late. They've won 5 straight and 8 of the last 9. So, I mean, they really dominated him that first meeting, too, winning 32-13. Sacked Joe Burrow 5 times. He's only been sacked 5 times since that game. So they sacked him 5 times in one game. So it's really going to come down if the Bengals can keep pressure off him, allow him time in the pocket to throw the ball and find some of those weapons in space. But I like the Bengals right here. I think Joe Burrow gets his first win against the Browns, able to rebound. I'm okay with anything under a touchdown. So I'm going to take the Bengals right here, -6.5.
Yeah, this team certainly looks like they're ready to rock and roll. Like, the difference is palpable from what it seemed with that Super Bowl loser hangover to all of a sudden it's like, okay, looks like them and somebody else the AFC Championship game again. That's really how it feels with Cincinnati.
They won 8 of 10 since starting 0-2, so really turned it around.
Yeah. Now the 1:00 game, the Texans, who at this point have nearly secured that first overall pick, the way they're playing, I don't think anybody doubts that it's an inevitability at this point, against the Cowboys, heading to Dallas for probably got to be one of the biggest spreads we've seen this entire season.
Yeah, especially with the Cowboys coming off all those kind of fluke. I mean, they got to 54 points, but it was mostly because the Texans had, I think, 6 or 7 turnovers in the game. So they kept fumbling. The Dallas is favored by 16 and a hook, 16 and a half. Probably will be 17 by game time. The public is still betting the Cowboys. 60% of the tickets at least on the Cowboys so far at most sports books. Total at 45 and a half. So that's a belief in that the Houston's offense is terrible, but the defense can be decent because those totals have been high in recent weeks, with Dallas averaging over 30 points a game in a recent stretch under Dak Prescott. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, basically they're predicting something like a 30-14, 31-15 kind of score, somewhere in that neighborhood, which is, basically the Texans team total will be low by projection. I would say, these kind of big spreads in recent years, NFL teams have started to cover these really big spreads at home. And over time, they generally don't. Usually the NFL is too competitive to have this kind of humiliating crushing by 3 scores. I would probably lean a little bit towards the Texans, in part because I think the Cowboys, that final score last week wasn't really that reflective of what happened in the game. And I think they may come back down to earth. And the Texans actually play a little better than they appeared to do due to the turnover and special teams bad fortune is why they couldn't compete with the Browns. So I'd lean a little bit towards the Texans, but I could see why people think Cowboys will blow them out.
Yeah, same. I'm staying away from them just because there's unknown which Texas is going to show up. And I think they've had some really bad losses, and they've had some really close losses, and didn't know which team was going to show up those weeks. Just kind of, I think Pierce is an excellent running back. You know, he's approaching 900 yards, I think, already this year. Advocate for rookie of the year there. He's been a beast all year long, but they've got nobody to throw to, and Mills is not, much of a more than an average quarterback, if that. So, so it's easy to see them getting blown out too. But yeah, I'm going to stay away from it.
Yeah, but the Texans are really bad. They've only scored over 20 points one time this season. The only team that has scored fewer points than them in the NFL is the hapless Denver Broncos. They're having all kinds of problems out there. But a big storyline for me, man, is the return. He returned to practice today, but Tyron Smith, the 8-time Pro Bowl left tackle, that's going to allow these guys, I don't know if he'll return this week or to wind up being next week. He's got a 21-day window to come back after tearing that hammy before the regular season. But that's going to allow them to move the rookie Tyler Smith, who's been playing left tackle, inside of that left guard position, really solidify that offensive line. So these guys are only going to get better. I mean, since Dak returned from his thumb injury, they're averaging 37.2 points per game, leading the NFL, 411 yards a game behind only the Chiefs, and have gone 5-1 in that span. So I just really like what the Cowboys are doing, man. I think they're going to – I know it's a high spread for NFL games. Look at over, you got to really get 3 touchdowns to get there and cover. I mean, 2 touchdowns is a field goal, but I like the Cowboys to really blow the doors off in this one, man. I'm going to take the Cowboys minus 16.5 right here, and that's my pick of the week for the NFL this week.
Wow. I mean, it's tough to imagine the Texans scoring 10-14 at this point. You know what I mean? Just like with the way that they're playing.
And the Texans are rotating quarterbacks in and out. You've had Kyle out in the last couple of weeks. They're going to give it back to Davis Mills this week. So there's so many questions. They don't know what they're going to do. And the Cowboys are just playing too good of football right now.
And we do have a question in the chat. Is this the worst Texans team we've ever seen?
Got to be up there.
It's got to be. I mean, a 1-win team. It doesn't get much worse than that. So
the older Carr brother was pretty terrible.
They got a tie, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the early. I mean that was the expansion, right? That initial Texans team when they did get David Carr, I believe that was rough. I think he set the record that season for most times getting sacked. That was a rough looking team for sure. But maybe more redeeming qualities than this team, at least so far. Next game we've got up the Vikings, who just continue to win 1-score games. Like over and over again, repeatedly, we see them either having to come back or hang on to these last-minute games, and they've done it. But now they're heading up to the Detroit Lions, who've got a couple wins under the belt themselves this year for the NFC North.
Yeah, good classic division rivalry. Detroit favored by 2.5. Public's pretty much evenly split on the game. Total of 52.5, which is pretty high for an NFL total this year. So they're basically predicting something like Detroit 27, Minnesota 25. It's fascinating to me that Detroit is favored in this game, just given where Detroit was and where people expected them to be going into the season, and given that Minnesota is has the win rate they do, but still aren't getting a lot of respect from the sports bettors. So I don't have a strong lean in the game, other than I think at some point one of these under bets on the Lions have to cash, but we'll see if it's this week or not.
Yeah, Jared Goff has come out and said that he's playing the best football of his career right now. So Vegas looks like they believe him. I'm not sure that I do. I like the Minnesota minus 2.5, especially if that gets to 3. I think that's fantastic, and I'm going to jump all over that.
Yeah, man, the Vikings can clinch the NFC North with a win or a tie this week. So, big time trying to win their first division crown since 2017. Last time these two teams met, the Lions had a 24-14 lead going into the fourth quarter, and the Vikings actually scored with about 45 seconds left to wind up winning that game. But, I mean, the Vikings look pretty good right here, but I like the Lions in this game. They've also looked very good, winning 4 of their last 5. Jared Goff's thrown 8 touchdowns to only 1 pick in his last 6 games, really playing, like I said, probably maybe the best football of his career right now. And I like the Lions in this game. I really do. I think that they could still they have a chance to, I know some things got to work out, but they can actually still share the division title with the Vikings, but they're going to have to win this week to be able to do that. So I like the Lions right here at home, minus 2.5, and I think I'm okay with anything under a field goal in this spot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a stretch for them to share that NFC North title with them. They're going to have to probably win out, and the Vikings have to lose out probably. But, hey, this Detroit team is more entertaining to watch than we've seen in quite some time. And I didn't think that's what we'd be sitting here talking about halfway through the season with Jared Goff at quarterback. But they're fun to watch. They really are. They got that run game going. They got a couple playmakers. When Amon-Ra St. Brown is on the field healthy, it seems like he gets banged up nearly every game. You're worried if he's going to be out. But Yeah, it seems fun.
It looked really bad. They started out 1-6, man, but 4 of those losses were by 4 points or less. So I mean, they were in those games and really had a chance to have a completely different record. So it could be a different story. I mean, they're still right there. They have a chance. A lot of things got to happen, but they're still in the playoff talk.
Their season this year started off the same way it ended last year. Like last year, we saw them in a ton of games. You saw Justin Tucker have to hit like a 66-yard field goal or something like that, right? So like break their hearts. Like they were consistently, losing these close games, and they finally figured out a way to start winning them. So we'll see if it continues for them. Now we got the Jaguars heading down to the Tennessee Titans. Titans coming off a beating from the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, there's some doubts about Trevor Lawrence. I guess they don't know whether it's a foot injury, toe injury. There's been lower leg injury. They haven't been all that specific with consistency. So it's not clear whether he's going to start this week. The Titans are favored by 4. Public is on the Titans, about 60%, a little bit more. They're also on the under, which is at 40.5, between 40 and 41, floating between there. And so the public's on the under, so that basically they're predicting like 22-18, another low-scoring Titans-style game. And which strikes me as a little bit on the lower scoring side, but a lot of Titans games have gone under this past week. I mean, Jacksonville almost managed to go under last week and should have gone under, but for giving up constant, continuous points defensively. So we'll see if Jacksonville makes something of it. But if they have a backup QB, it's a bit of an X factor. I would lean towards the Titans if Trevor Lawrence is not in there.
Oh, yeah, I think it's a lock if Trevor Lawrence is not in there. These Titan team, Henry's already over 1,000 yards, got 10 touchdowns. He's played as well as he could. They're not feeding him enough because they're trying to get something going in that passing game, which is just impossible because they have nobody to throw to. They let go of their GM after this loss to the Eagles, I guess, and saying, yeah, that trade you made was terrible and you're an idiot and you're gone. But yeah, I think Vrabel had a lot to do with that. It has the feel here in Tennessee like ownership chose Vrabel over the GM, got rid of him, going to give the reins to him for now until they see what comes up in the offseason bringing another GM in. But yeah, I think personnel decisions led them to where they are right now in the season. It's like one of the greatest teams you could have on many aspects, and then horrible and the worst in the NFL in terms of passing, and they have nobody to throw to. Even when Burks has been out there, he's done a little bit, but like he keeps getting banged up. So he's not somebody that can do it on his own. Can't take over a game the way obviously Brown can and did this last week. So yeah, but they do enough defensively. They have the best rushing defense in the NFL, or second best rushing defense in the NFL. And they're real good at stopping scoring, even though they have not that great of a secondary. That's why these games have tended to go under, and that trend can continue. And I think it definitely will if Lawrence is out.
Yeah, I like the Titans in this game, and I know they had a bad game last week. I think part of that is because the Philadelphia Eagles are a really, really good football team. But the Jaguars are 1-5-1 against the spread in the last 7 in Tennessee, and 2-8 in the last 10 heads up in this series. And the favorite is 4-1 against the spread in this series in the last 5 meetings. I think the Titans are playing good football. I think they had a bad week last week. Like I said, you got the question of Trevor Lawrence. One thing I will say about this game, if you are considering the Titans at 3.5, you probably want to try to jump on it early, because if it does come out that Trevor Lawrence is not going to play, the spread is probably going to climb a little bit. So I like the Titans right here. I honestly don't care if Trevor Lawrence does play. I think the Titans, I don't think it's going to climb above a touchdown. So anything under a touchdown, I'm okay with you taking the Titans right here, because I think they have a rebound week after last week and get back in it. And the Jaguars just got too many things going on down there, man. They're still young, a lot of youth. Got to develop those guys, and they're just not. The Titans are battling for a playoff spot. So I like the Titans right here to rebound and get a big win this week at home.
Titans need it. After the last 2 weeks, they definitely need this bounce back game, and I think the Titans will lock it down. Now we got those Eagles who gave them the beat down, heading to New York to play the New York Football Giants, coming off a tie with the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, I had the Giants, so I was okay with the tie because they were underdogs at home. But Giants are 7-point home underdogs, so a lot of respect to the Eagles after that beat down on the Titans. 60% of the tickets are still coming in on the Giants, though, as a home underdog, because they've been very live as a home underdog this year. The total is at 45.5. Public's hammering the under. They think it's going to be a low-scoring division rivalry-style game, basically predicting something like a 26-20 Eagles win or thereabouts. I would lean towards the Giants catching a touchdown at home just because the Giants have been tough at home this year, getting that many points in a division rivalry game, despite the Eagles sometimes just blowing the doors off folks.
Big home dogs, big home dogs. Yeah, I'm taking the Giants here. That's too many points for them at home. I think the Eagles are a far better team, but being division rivalry, they're going to play tough in this game. And, yeah, I'm definitely taking the Giants. It's too many points at home.
Yeah, man, you got Jalen Hurts coming off back-to-back NFC Player of the Week honors. First Eagle to do that since Michael Vick back in 2010. Playing some really good football right now, but this is a team he's had some trouble with. In 2 starts against the Giants, he's only got a 51.7% passer rating. Last year when they played it, they lost. The Eagles lost 13-7 out there at the Giants, and he had 3 picks in that game. He's only had 3 picks this entire season and 357 pass attempts. So it's going to kind of see if he can right that ship and be able to turn it on against these guys where he's not been able to do so before. And but I like the Giants right here at home too, man. I think they have a lot to play for. They got to really kind of they need a win right here to stay in the race in this division, a very, very strong NFC East. But I think right here, it's sitting around 6.5, 7. I think you need to buy it up 2-7 so the touchdown saves you. I think the Eagles could maybe find a way to win it with a field goal at the end and stuff. But I think a touchdown's far too much right here. So I'm going to take the Giants plus 6.5 at home.
Yeah, these I can tell you that tie, it seemed like the Commanders were a little bit happier with that tie than the Giants seemed to be, especially how that game ended. The crazy thing is the Commanders have a bye this week, and they play the Giants next week. So they're playing the Giants in back-to-back weeks for them, which is crazy. I don't know if that's ever happened before.
The Giants really laid an egg last week, Tim. They had 112 yards across 9 possessions between the second half and overtime last week, so just could not move the ball or do anything in the second half last week. And they really got to feel like they let one slip away right there because they needed a win, not a tie in that game.
Yeah, 100%. They needed that, and they had the game in hand, and they just couldn't close it out. And Taylor Heineke just continues to do shit when people don't expect him to. So that's been his nature the entire time.
He's a magician, man.
Mm-hmm. Now we got another divisional rivalry game here between the Baltimore Ravens, who are likely, I think it's official now that Lamar Jackson will not play. At least based on how they were talking. I don't know if they officially made that word, but it sounds like he's not going to play against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, because of Lamar Jackson's absence, even though Huntley played well last year against the Steelers in particular and some other teams when he stepped in. The Steelers are favored by 2.5 at home. Public's about evenly split on this game, except they like the under. They think it's going to be an old school Baltimore-Pittsburgh style game without Lamar Jackson. So even though the total is at 37, which is a very low total in the NFL, 2/3, almost 70% of the money is still on the under. Because of they don't think either offense is great, and they think both defenses are smash mouth and will contain both teams. The Steelers themselves have a long injury roster. It looks like an NBA nightly injury roster. 4 or 5 key guys questionable to play, including Najee Harris. So I don't have any strong lean on this game either way. I think it's if Lamar Jackson was there, this would be probably a Ravens by 2.5. So that's a lot of respect for Lamar Jackson, maybe a little bit on the high side for that. Not sold on Kenny Pickett at all. And watching him in the game film, he throws the ball to the person. Cody and I were watching it break down when against Indianapolis a couple of weeks back, and he doesn't throw with anticipation. He throws to the location, and historically, that is not a good recipe for being a quality quarterback in the NFL. Maybe he'll adjust. Maybe he'll accommodate. He's got a good tight end. He's got George Pickens, an underrated wide receiver. But they really rely on that run game. The Ravens defense, of course, as Crickets mentioned, is stacked up with the kind of trades they've made midseason. So I would lean a little bit. If I lean in any direction, I would lean in the Ravens direction, but I think the spread is mostly right. I might be tempted by the over just because everybody's on the under, but that would be a weather-dependent factor.
Yeah, I kind of like the over, but again, that's going to depend on the weather. It's going to be pretty cold there. 37 degrees right now is what they're saying it's going to be. If it gets any colder than that, I might worry about that over. But at any rate, they are a team that has heavily relied on the run, and this year Najee Harris hasn't been up to par. He was projected to be a top 5 running back, and he's not anywhere near that. So and with that being the case, that passing game is just not enough to get points on anybody. So yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty boring game without Lamar Jackson in it.
Yeah, man, the Ravens have lost 4 straight to the Steelers. A lot of people don't realize that, but I like what the Steelers are doing right now. You know, they've won 3 of their last 4 games. Kenny Pickett hasn't turned the ball over in 4 games. I think they're kind of trying to ease him along in this offense, not really open that playbook up yet. I think there's still an outside chance they can make a playoff berth. A lot of stuff's got to happen, but I think they're kind of looking at it as a lost season. They're just trying to grow for the future and allow him to get comfortable in that offense. I don't think they used George Pickens enough. I think last week he had 1 catch for 2 yards or something like that. And, you know, just not get a lot of targets, but it's crazy. He'll have 10 or 12 targets in one game, and the next week he'll only have 2 targets. So I think they need to get him more involved in the offense. They got a lot of weapons around him. I think Najee, there's a possibility Najee, he got an oblique injury. He may not play this weekend, but I got to go against you guys in this one, man. I got to lean toward the under. Tyler Huntley's a very capable backup in Lamar Jackson's absence, but he completed like 27 to 32 passes last week for only 182 yards. So they're throwing a lot of screens, a lot of check downs and things like that. And I just don't see these offenses are really getting rolling this week. Like I said, Baltimore's defense is very, very capable. And you got TJ Watt going to try to get Tyler Huntley and Lamar Jackson have very similar play styles. So it's kind of the same type game plan for the Steelers. You got TJ Watt back, starting to get more healthy. And I just don't see these 2 teams getting over 36.5. I know it's an incredibly low number, but I just don't think we're going to see a lot of fireworks in this game. So I'm going to go under in this spot.
And I think George Pickens even like voiced his concerns about not getting the ball enough, which the rookie wide receiver, and you already taken after some of the top guys in the game right now. If as a rookie, you're already speaking out about that. But I mean, obviously the dude's talented as hell. I'm sure they'd like to get him the ball more as well. But that Steelers team just struggles. So that could end up being a really competitive game. Seems like every game the Ravens have played is competitive, whether Lamar Jackson's playing or not, because they give up a 4th quarter lead.
And especially this rivalry. It tends to be mean, nasty, hard-hitting, tough, close, competitive.
If you love defense, watch this one.
Yeah.
It might be a teaser bet kind of game.
Right.
Because it's really hard to see the Steelers winning by like more than a touchdown, for example. So you can get right now, you can get the Ravens plus 8.5. Hard to see this being a blowout either way. And generally speaking, low totals are good bets to bet on teasers. Because when you see that low total, it's really the league, it's really the Vegas saying this is not going to be a likely blowout.
Yeah. No running and gunning for these teams, probably. But speaking of run and gun, Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City Chiefs, coming off a rough loss to the Bengals. This might be just what they need to get back on track, headed to Denver to play the Broncos and Russell Wilson, although that defense has been consistently very good all season long.
No doubt. Broncos just can't score. Last week, you know, they were the first time in 30 years or something like that to lose a game when the opposing team only scored 10 points and had some other factors going into that. It was just, you know, they keep finding ways to lose. They keep finding ways not to score. Even though when you look at the stat line, some of these games, Wilson's stats actually aren't that bad. It's really wild. So the Chiefs are almost 10-point double-digit favorites on the road in high altitude there at Denver. Despite that, 3/4 of the tickets are coming in on the Chiefs, as nobody believes in the Russell Wilson-led Denver Broncos this year, as they try to set a record for not being able to score 20 or more points in a game, or 18 or more points in a game for that matter. In fact, on the money line, almost 95% of the cash in the tickets are on the Chiefs, even though they're minus 440 favorites. The total at 44, public thinks that I've been one of the people betting over and losing it every time against on the Broncos. The public thinks that the Broncos just will never score. So 2/3 of the tickets are coming in on the under. When it's for a Chiefs game, 44 is a pretty darn low under. Basically, they're predicting a 27-17 Kansas City win in Denver. That's a lot of points. In fact, I think my free bet of the week here on Sports Picks will be, especially if it gets up to 10, but you could probably wait, and it probably will get up to 10, will be the Denver Broncos catching that many points at home, because even if Russell Wilson doesn't perform great, that defense, I think, will keep it close.
Correct. These are still NFL teams, and these home dogs this year, again, have made money. And at 10 points is just a lot to get at home when you're still an NFL team, even if you are working on records to break for the lowest scoring team of all time. But yeah, no, I like the Broncos getting those points here at home, and I'm kind of interested in that over too. I'll pay more close attention to see if that moves at all, because if that comes down at all, I'm going to jump all over that over as well.
Man, I'm against y'all on all these this week, man. I like the Chiefs right here. You know, Patrick Mahomes had his streak of 26 straight wins in November and December snap last week. He is the most. He's got the most in a row in November, December. So like I don't see him having too bad. He didn't have a bad game, but I don't see him losing 2 in a row right here. The Broncos just still got all kinds of problems going on out there. The Chiefs are 6-0 against the spread in their last 6 against the team on the road against a team with a losing record. They've just really dominated this series, played 10-3 against the spread in the last 13 meetings, heads up. I like the Chiefs right here to get a 2-touchdown plus victory in this game. And really, I don't think it's going to be much to watch. Russell Wilson, that offense is just, there's just too many questions. They paid that man too much money for this offense to be that dismal. So I'm going to have to go with the Chiefs right here. Anything under 10, like I said, if you find it at 10, I'd buy it down to 9.5. So 10 gets it for you. But I'm okay with the Chiefs, anything under 10 right here.
I just love that the Denver Broncos continue to struggle. That's my favorite part of this entire thing. I get to keep making Russell Wilson fail videos each and every week, which I'm totally fine with, which I enjoy doing. Mr. Unlimited. And it's been a rough go for these Denver Broncos. Now, go ahead.
I was going to say the next game up is the other videos you get to make every other week, which is Tampa Bay.
That's right.
Fourth quarter comeback.
And this is one of the more interesting spreads that I think we have this week. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming off looking horrendous, looking terrible, looking miserable once again until the final 4 minutes where Tom Brady activates and they just go on a tear, score 2 touchdowns in the final 3 minutes to win against the Saints in Tampa Bay. But now they're heading to San Francisco, and they're an underdog, significant underdog.
I mean, and an underdog against a San Francisco team. I mean, who's the quarterback that's going to be playing? It's
Brock Purdy, I think.
Brock Purdy
from Iowa State.
Mr. Irrelevant from last year, man.
Now, I guess there's talk that Jimmy G might get back by the playoffs, which if you got to be San Francisco, you got to hope that's the case, because Brock Purdy did not show much to me last week. It's because the final score looked impressive for the 49ers, but that had more to do with the Dolphins, in my view, than it did the 49ers offense with Brock Purdy in it. So you're right. San Francisco favored by almost 4, 3.5, depending on where you catch it. Really low total. This is another total. It's like the totals have been getting killed on all year. Denver, I keep expecting them to score and they don't. Tampa Bay, keep expecting them to score and they don't. Green Bay kept expecting them to score and not. So but it's another one of those crazy low totals at 37 points. I mean, it's Tom Brady. I mean, when's the last time you saw Tom Brady outside of a snowstorm with a game total at 37, where he's expected to score? I mean, the team total for Tampa, depending on where you get it right now, is less than 17 points in some places, 16.5. It's like, wow, I get it. I mean, given how they performed at times this season, it's still Tom Brady, as he showed last week in the last 4 minutes.
And they still only scored 16 points or something.
17, yeah, they won 17 to 16.
You know?
New Orleans screwed up a couple of times driving. I had the total over in that game. Drove me nuts. They couldn't figure out. New Orleans, I think 5 times or 4 times in the red zone, bunch of field goals. Andy Dalton getting a little bit shaky. Times good, times not so good. Maybe it's time to shift back to Jameis Winston, see what he can do, especially as their season kind of falls apart on him. But the public's evenly split both on the total and on the total. They're really split on the spread. The only place they're confident is they think there's no way the Niners lose, which is kind of interesting to me. About 3/4 of the tickets on the Niners to win straight up. And again, it's with Brock Purdy against Tom Brady. Okay. So I would lean towards Tampa Bay, especially when you're catching that extra half a point. I would lean again towards the over, but I've been getting burned on these Tampa overs all year. And in fact, like in the 1 o'clock time period, my favorite teaser would be teasing the Ravens and the Browns in that AFC North divisional rivalry games. In the 4 o'clock time slot Eastern, I would tease the Broncos and Tampa Bay, because you can, if you get at 6.5 or 6, where depending on where the 49ers are, you can get them. You can get Broncos at more than 2 touchdowns, and you can get the Tampa at almost 10 points. But I would lean a little bit. I'd lean over and lean Tom Brady and Tampa on the road, catching that many points. Seems a little high with Brock Purdy being your quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like Tampa Bay here. them being underdogs when there's so many unknowns about that quarterback, that just doesn't make sense to me at all. And last week, Fournette, came back. He didn't look. He looked pretty good actually. Watching him run, I mean, he had 10 carries for 49 yards. He did look like he had an extremely healthy Thanksgiving. Not fat shaming there. I had one myself, but yeah, he looked a little bit bigger. And I don't know if that power worked, but yeah, I mean, rushing at almost 5 yards per carry is pretty darn good in the NFL. So if he can keep that up and get some more carries, that can open things up for Tom Brady in that passing game quite a bit, and they can really possibly even, blow out the 49ers at home against a quarterback who may or may not be able to score.
Yeah, but Tampa Bay can't seem to get out of their own way on the offensive side of the ball. Like, you got guys dropping passes, your bad penalties in the red zone that's getting you, making you play behind the sticks. That's why they can't sustain drives. That's why Tom Brady's getting so frustrated. Is because they keep shooting themselves in the foot when they have opportunities to put the ball in the end zone. I think they're going to have more troubles this weekend, man. In my opinion, the San Francisco 49ers defense is, if not the best, definitely one of the top 3 defenses in the entire league. They're going to get pressure on Tom Brady. That offensive line has really struggled this year. You're going to have Bosa going after him, man. You got Fred Warner, some of those guys. That is a really, really nasty defense. And they got guys in the secondary that can cover these receivers. I'm going to have to lean toward the under in this one. Like I said, another low number, 37.5. But Tampa Bay struggles of late on the offensive side of the ball. And equally as much, that defense for Tampa Bay is the reason their record is what it is. I mean, they played really, really bad. It's really a miracle that they're at 6-6 because that defense has kept them in a lot of games. And like I said, you don't have Jimmy G going, not really efficient in that offense. Brock Purdy didn't do a lot last week, did enough to get the win, but he's still a rookie, man. In his first ever NFL start, it's going to be playing one of the better, top echelon, top half of the league defenses anyway. And so I'm going to have to lean under right here. I just don't see the way they get a lot of points in this game. This could be a 21-17, 21-14 type final for me. So I like the under right here, 37.5. Maybe buy it up to 38 to save you right there, just in case it is 21-17, something like that. But I'm going to go under right here.
I mean, that spread is, it's an indictment on Tom Brady and this team that has struggled to score all year. But when you look at San Francisco, it's a belief in that defense, which I think is rightfully deserved. And I think it's a belief in Kyle Shanahan with Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle out there that he can find a way to make it work kind of with whoever you throw out there. And they didn't put a claim in for Baker Mayfield like some people expected that they would. They said, hey, I guess we're going to go. We're going to sign Josh Johnson to the practice squad. Maybe he'll come and be the backup. And it sounds like it's Brock Purdy. And Kyle Shanahan, he'll take anybody. He'll start anybody. Like we've seen him start C.J. Beathard, Nick Mullins. He'll start anybody. So we'll see what happens for this 49ers squad. It's definitely going to be a game to watch. Now you got the Carolina Panthers after freshly releasing Baker Mayfield. They're headed to Seattle to play the Seahawks in the 12th man.
Yeah, Seattle favored by 3.5. Total of 44. They're expecting a 24-20 Seattle win. The public's leaning towards the over in Seattle, but not by a big margin. I think that line is probably about right, depending on where you put Geno Smith. If you think Geno Smith is going to continue to be a good quarterback, that line's actually a little light. I would actually take Seattle if you have confidence that Geno is going to continue to put up high-quality numbers like he did in the big comeback last week to pull off the win. But otherwise, the spread is about right, depending on where you put Geno Smith.
Yeah, I like the Seahawks here. I might be late to the party, but I'm sold. I'm finally in. I like him. It took me a long time, because coming from the Geno of old that we saw at the Jets, it took me this long to get out of the shock. But man, he plays well and he plays with precision. Just an accurate quarterback this year. A lot of fun to watch. So I'm sold. I'm taking the Seahawks here with 3.5 because I think it should probably be closer to 5 or 6.
Yeah, I'm going to look at the total in this game, man. This is the Seahawks team that just gave up 23 points to the John Wolford-led Rams. So that's a lot of points for a team with a quarterback we've never heard of before. And once again, Geno Smith, like you said, played great football, man. Really efficient with the football, really putting his team in a spot to win games. In this series, the over is 6-0 in the last 6 in Seattle and 6-0 in the last 6 overall. And 7-3 in Seattle's last 10 at home. So, I mean, I look for the over. There's going to be some points here. 43.5 is a little low for me. I feel like it should be sitting more around 47 or 48. So I look for there to be some points. I think it's going to be a little closer than people expect. You got the East Coast to West Coast travel for the Panthers and stuff like that. I think the Seahawks find a way to win it at the end, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had to get the last-second field goal or something like that. But I'm going to take the over right here, and I expect these offenses to be able to do some work. And this might be one of the – it's weird, but this might be one of the more exciting games of the weekend.
12 games into the season, we're sitting here, Geno Smith. I think he's leading the league in completion percentage. I think he's on pace to be the only quarterback not named Drew Brees to have a single season completion percentage of over 72. And
wow, that's incredible.
That's insane to think about. We're talking about Geno Smith. And I love to see this career resurgence, especially because what it means on the opposite side for Russell Wilson. And the Seahawks are absolutely rocking and rolling this year. It's just fun to see.
The Broncos should have paid Geno Smith $250 million, man.
They certainly shouldn't have paid Russell Wilson.
If you told me preseason that Lockett would be 1,000-yard wide receiver with Geno Smith as his quarterback, you would own my house.
And he scored he scored in 5 straight games too, man.
Yeah, and on top of that, the Seahawks are getting Denver's pick, which right now I think is the 3rd overall pick. I think.
Wow. Yeah, top 5 anyway.
So, I mean, they're just hoping the Broncos keep losing, and so am I. Now, the Sunday night game, you get the Dolphins coming off, definitely look to have a chink in that armor after that performance last week. But the Dolphins are heading to LA to play the Chargers.
Yeah, I think this was the game they flipped, right? So it was going to be somebody else, and then they just decided to flip the Sunday night game because they thought this would be more interesting and
Flexed
it should be more
interesting.
Yeah. The interesting. I mean, the Chargers don't have a great home field advantage, but Dolphins are. This is a true cross country travel, and Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots. You look at it historically, some of those teams that travel across the country have had trouble with a complete East Coast to West Coast transition. But it's a night game. The Dolphins favored by 3, total of 51.5, high total. Basically, they're predicting 27-24 for the Dolphins. And more than two-thirds of the tickets are on the Dolphins. So despite last week, the gamblers that love Miami have not given up on them at all. Over 80% of the money line tickets coming in on Miami. And 3/4 on the over. So they think it's going to continue to be explosive, continue to be fun, continue to be offensive, and the Dolphins will get back on track. I would actually lean a little bit to the Chargers. I think that's a little bit much at this point. But I don't have a strong lean on the game.
Yeah, I think it's right where it should be. I think Miami comes in there and wins this game by a field goal. But that's not to say the Chargers couldn't do some work here. I mean, Justin Herbert's looked pretty good all year. I mean, even in getting hurt that one game and then standing up with those bruised ribs and throwing that huge touchdown, that was really impressive to watch. So I wouldn't be shocked by anything he does for the rest of the year after seeing that. Eckler has not had a ton of carries, but he hasn't done much with what he's had either. He's another back that was supposed to be an easy 1,000-yard back that was going to be in the top 5 that has not. He's kind of underperformed. But he's had some decent weeks, and he's got, I think, 7 touchdowns. So he's done well there. But yeah, Tyreek Hill is just a freak. And that combination of Tagovailoa to him, and as well as having a dozen other weapons that he could use at any other time, it's insane to watch what they're doing down there in the Dolphins. So I think this is about right. The Dolphins go in and beat them at home.
Yeah, I look for a lot of points in this one. This is a battle between the number 5 and number 6 picks in the 2020 NFL draft between Herbert and Tua. So they've only met one time in their pro careers. Tua got the win in that one, but it's a Charger team that's been decimated by injuries all year long. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen have been on the field at the same time for less than 50 snaps this season. They're 2 biggest receivers that they have. It really changes that offense when both those guys are on the field. And the defense has also been decimated by injuries, losing Bosa and their top acquisition in free agency at cornerback, J.C. Jackson. He hasn't been able to play much of late. Rashawn Slater, the left tackle, has been out. So they've dealt with a lot of injuries, but they have allowed 150-plus rushing yards in 6 consecutive games. So I look for the Dolphins to be able to kind of get that run game rolling a little bit more this week, be a little more balanced. You look at the number 4 offense of the NFL and the number 2 passing offense. Tua is in the MVP conversation. It seems like a long time ago when, just last year about this time when they were they were all kind of calling for his head down in Miami, but he has really stepped up this season. Tyreek Hill has 6 games this year with 125 plus receiving yards. So really elite offense down there. And the Chargers could score. I mean, Justin Herbert's a freak too, man. He hasn't got a lot of help around him. Like I said, the injuries and stuff like that have really hurt them. But I look for a lot of points in this game. I think the Dolphins find a way to win it. But I'm gonna go over the 52.5 right here. I know it's a big number, but I think there's gonna be a lot of points, a lot of fireworks in this game this weekend.
It's a good flex. And ironically, they flexed out Chiefs Broncos. So thank God the NFL saved us from yet another Russell Wilson primetime game. Should have made a video about that. I might still make a video about that because that's just absolute gold. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game on Sunday night. And then the Monday game, can't say I'm looking forward to that one as much. You got the Patriots heading to Arizona to play the Cardinals.
Yeah, I really don't know what inspired a lot of their scheduling on the Monday night games this year. But because some of these you could see coming before the season, not being great games. New England is favored by 1.5 traveling across, crisscrossing the country. Total of 44.5. They're basically predicting something like a 23-22 thereabouts New England win. 3/4 of the money line tickets are also on New England. Total is about evenly bet both sides. I would say Arizona catching points at home, despite Kyler Murray's up and down sporadic habits, even with the return of DeAndre Hopkins, is still a little bit much. And this is a New England offense that hasn't shown much. At times it's flashed and then it recedes as soon as it flashes. And it's been on a regressive trail of late. So don't like to bet against Belichick coming off a loss. But I would lean a little bit Arizona catching points at home on Monday night.
Yeah, I like Arizona being favored at home here. The only thing that great I see about that New England offense has been Stevenson. He's got over 700 yards and only 160 carries. He's been stellar for the Patriots this year, but otherwise, Mac Jones has been up and down, and that defense has been pretty good. These games have tended to have gone under, so I like the under here, and I like the Cardinals.
I like the Patriots right here going at -1.5, man. The Cardinals are 2-10 against the spread in their last 12 Monday night games and 3-9 in their last 12 home games. So they've really struggled as of late. I think there's too many questions of that offense. I think it's time to start talking about Cliff Kingsbury being on that hot seat, man, because you got so many weapons out there and they spent a bunch of money on some of those guys and they're really not getting the results they expected. I mean, this is a team I expected to be competing for that NFC West and being up there. It's one of my preseason Super Bowl contenders, and they really have just underperformed right now. We thought that 8.5, their preseason win total was sitting at 8.5. We thought that was way low, and we were high on those Cardinals to go over, man. And I don't think they're going to get there. It just ain't going to happen. And I think they got all kinds of questions. Like I said, Belichick December, man, he's going to game plan for Kyler Murray. And I just think there's too many question marks for that Cardinals side. So I'm going to take the Pats right here on the road, -1.5.
Yeah, this is not the best Monday night matchup. I guess the real question for the Cardinals at this point in the season is, what happens next year? What happens with this coach next year? Is he still here? Is Cliff Kingsbury still here? Do they make some drastic changes? All that is definitely in the future for these teams. But that's all for the NFL. Now we got to talk a little bit of college football because now there are no games this weekend. I think we're waiting for.
There's one.
Oh, you're right. There is one, Robert. We should talk about that one. The only game that will be played this weekend, and that's one of the legendary ones in college football history.
Absolutely. It's Army-Navy, which is always great fun to watch. I don't think they'll let Joe Biden go up there because they'll have no idea what he'll do. So he'll probably not be the president. Sometimes visits the game. I don't think this president will, is my hunch. But the Navy's favored by 2.5, total of 32.5. Total is dropping in some places, low as 32, 31.5. That's because the academies, games between the academies have gone under at a ridiculous rate for the last 20, 25 years. This will be one of the lowest totals in the history of modern college football at 32. They're basically predicting Navy wins 17-15. It's that kind of score. The public is evenly split between Navy and Army in terms of the spread, but they lean towards Navy and that's probably because they were how they played recently against some big games like Notre Dame and Central Florida, whereas Army hasn't quite had that same opportunity. Though statistically, you look at their profile, Army's been the better team this year. I would, about almost 90% of the bets are on the under because of the history of this. And I've been shorting that this year. I've been betting over in these academy games. Haven't hit it yet. I'll probably bet the over again because I think this is so low that it'll bounce back. And I like Army catching points at home. I think they're just a little bit better team than Navy this year.
Yeah, I like Army in the over here as well. I mean, both these teams are top 10 rushing teams nationally. The Army scores about 7 points more per game than Navy does. So that's why I like Army in this game. I know they did play close against UCF and Notre Dame as well as Cincinnati too. I think Navy did. But yeah, with these teams rushing so well, I look for this game to go a little bit over, and I like Army.
And I'm probably going to catch some shit for this, but I just don't understand the hype on this game. I want to be very clear in saying that I am forever grateful for what our servicemen and women do and the sacrifices they make to provide us with our freedoms that we have in this country. We live in the best country in the world, and I'm forever thankful for that. But this is always a terrible football game. This hasn't been a good football game in years and years in my lifetime, man. I'm 35 years old almost, and it's not been a good game in forever. I mean, you're looking at a 4-17 playing a 5-6 team. Like I said, one of the lowest totals in college football history. I just don't. I don't get it. I don't get it. Maybe that makes me a shithead. I don't know, but I just am not a big fan of this game, and I don't understand the hype. So I don't have a recommendation or a lean because I'll be honest, I'm not going to watch a play of this game. So good luck to both teams, and may the best team win.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for the academies themselves, for everybody in the armed forces, it's a big game. Yeah, the play isn't super fun to watch. I think that's pretty much almost everybody can admit that. But for general onlookers, when there's no other games going on, you get to see everybody at the academy kind of acting a fool while in their uniforms and all this stuff. So it's fun for the national for people on the national stage to look at it. But yeah, it's not very good. But when it does come to college football, obviously we now know who's in the top four, the final four, the college football playoff. You got Georgia, you got Michigan, you got TCU and Ohio State. I think everybody here will probably agree with me, considering y'all's SEC lean, that Alabama is a better team than TCU. And Alabama is probably a better team than Ohio State and Michigan as well. But I want to ask each of you guys, did the committee get it right with what their goal is for the college football playoff, with all the parameters and how these seasons played out? Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was especially when TCU was the first team screwed out of the playoff back in 2014, I believe. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, even if TCU loses, they're not going to screw them twice. Too much attention to that factor. And TCU, went to overtime against Kansas State. So their only loss was by a field goal in overtime. So I think if you went on resume, the only team I would disagree with is Ohio State. I didn't disagree with TCU. They played in their conference championship. They barely lost. That was their only loss of the year. Michigan won the Big Ten. No issue there. Georgia dominated the SEC. No issue there. It was really that fourth pick. And to me, it was like between Ohio State and Alabama. If Hendon Hooker was healthy, Ohio State and Tennessee. You could even argue to some degree Ohio State even in Clemson, given that Clemson is a conference champion in the ACC. I was just not sold on Ohio State in terms of how they resume-wise. Talent-wise, absolutely. But resume-wise, I thought Ohio State had the weakest. Like everybody was comparing Alabama and TCU, and I was like, I think TCU belongs there from a resume perspective. I would be comparing Alabama and Ohio State. Ohio State had one big game all year, two solid games. One game at Penn State that they won. That's their only quality win.
Yeah.
You could argue Notre Dame at home to start the season. But otherwise, it's one thing to lose to a team like Michigan. It's another thing that it'd be your final game, that it'd be at home, and that you get ultimately the final score is not close. That I just thought that was a disqualifying game for anybody except Ohio State. Like for all the discussion about whether the SEC gets preferential treatment by the committee, the team that has most often got into the playoffs with the most controversy has been one team, and it's been Ohio State. This will be like the third time they got in, where most people thought they would not get in the week before. So now, if you were looking at it from a talent perspective, if you had a Vegas perspective, and this was Nick Saban's point, who's going to be the favorite? Then Alabama's number 2. It's Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2, Michigan number 3, and Ohio State number 4. And TCU is out. And I think, they also clearly squirreled with the numbers to have TCU stay third. because they didn't want a Michigan-Ohio State rematch in the semifinal. And so now my own view is I think that the real national title game is the Georgia-Ohio State game. Because from a talent perspective, these are the two powerhouses. Ohio State had a bad game, but talent-wise, if they show up to perform and they have 4 or 5 weeks to get ready, they are the second most talented team in the playoff. I'm not sold on Michigan. I haven't been all year. They played great when they needed to against Ohio State and Penn State. Credit to them, so they deserve to be in the playoffs. But I don't, when they've got to this level, they've often got blown out when they face the elite talent team. I think the Michigan TCU winner, it will not be competitive in the national title game, regardless of who it is. And I think it'll be tough. Ohio State, Georgia will be a fun game. I think Ohio State, I think they probably should. I think it'll be very close and competitive. But Georgia has been head and shoulders above everybody all year. And it's going to be Ohio State will need its best game to pull off the upset. But I could clearly see it happening. But I don't think the national title game will actually be that competitive.
Yeah, I think that I 100% agree with the positioning of these teams. I said it on our Sunday stream that I thought they were going to try to do that because historically they've tried to avoid rematches in this opening game, whether it be Georgia, Alabama, or whatever. They intentionally seed to avoid those rematches in the first thing. But go ahead, Cody. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, this time of year always comes down to like, what are they looking for here? Clearly, they've never been in search of getting the best 4 teams in there. This year, I think they kind of looked at it as trying to get what was fair. And you could make that argument for what they've done. You can make that argument with a 1-loss Ohio State. I tend to agree with Robert there. Resume-wise, they didn't really beat a lot of other people, but they probably would have if they had the opportunity. Had that one bad game. So being fair, though, I think those are the right 4 teams to get in. Now, clearly, I think Alabama's a better team than all those teams. So if you're looking for the best 4 teams, he was also right in the 1, 2, 3, 4. That'd be Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan in that order.
I think they got so caught up they didn't want to let a two-loss team in, and I'm okay with TCU getting in. Man, I don't think they should be punished for losing an extra game in overtime, a game that they earned. They had the number 1 strength of record going into last week. They lose by a field goal in overtime where they got stopped on the goal line stand. Good for Kansas State. Congratulations to them. But I'm like you, Robert. I want to compare Ohio State and Alabama right here, and I'm looking at Alabama, who loses 2 road games in very hostile road SEC environments, night games against 2 teams that are considered rivals to them by combined 4 points on the last play of the game. Like we said earlier before we got on the stream, and Alabama missed the CFP by 1 play this year. And the one that really sticks out to me is the LSU, the 2-point conversion, where they're able to score it in overtime and get the win right there. But then you got Ohio State's in there in their rivalry game with a much worse strength of schedule that gets beat by 3+ touchdowns at home. Alabama will never get beat by 3+ touchdowns at home as long as Nick Saban is alive. And I simply think right here they got so caught up in not having a 2-loss team in the CFP, will be the first time ever that has happened. And they kind of, I think there's a little against the SEC bias right here. They don't want to get 2 SEC teams in because Alabama's fully capable going in as a 4 seed right there and winning the national championship. And now so is Ohio State. But I just think when you compare the 2 teams right there, you got to look at what's a bad loss. And I don't think Alabama has a bad loss on their resume. And Ohio State's loss, to me, it's the 2nd or 3rd worst loss ever for a team to make the CFP. So I kind of have a problem with that. Like I said, Alabama would be favored over every team in the top 4 except Georgia. And I just think that Alabama Crimson Tide team, I do think they kind of got job. Now they'll probably go and lose the Sugar Bowl to Kansas State because they're not motivated and all that stuff. And everybody will say, I told you so. But they would have been a lot more motivated to play Georgia in the Peach Bowl than they will be to play Kansas State in the Sugar Bowl. So I don't necessarily feel like they got it right. We're only going to have to deal with this for 1 more season. Then we're going to get the 12-team playoff. And then we'll just have to hear the 13-ranked team bitch and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Then it would be like it'd be some irrelevant team, but we won't care as much.
Right.
But I think that when you look at that Michigan-Ohio State game, that final score is not indicative of the game itself. That score got away with 2 real big Michigan, 80-yard runs at the end of the game when Ohio State was playing super aggressive defense, trying to get the ball back. And it got out of hand the last couple minutes. So it was a more competitive game than that. So maybe the committee is taking that into consideration. And then I also think if you are Alabama, when you look at their schedule, for years, Alabama has been able to get away with scheduling in the beginning of the year one out of conference game, like an actual legit game, and then the rest of their schedule has just been dog shit other than SEC. Very tiny schools, Alabama, Louisiana Monroe, like Utah State, Austin P, I think was this year, things like that. And that's fine when you're going through this buzzsaw in the SEC. But when you lose the two biggest games in that SEC schedule, those two biggest challenges of Tennessee and LSU, and then the rest of the SEC, these games you could have had don't look as impressive. Some of those wins don't look as impressive as you thought they may have been. Now you're in a position where the committee can justify not putting you in.
Well, I got to think about it like this. Okay, if Ohio State plays Tennessee in Knoxville in a night game, or if they play LSU in Baton Rouge in a night game, does Ohio State fare better than Alabama did? I don't think so. I think
they probably lose.
I think they get beat worse than Alabama did. They don't lose on the last play of the game, I don't feel like. And I just look at Alabama and I just think they're a more complete team. I know Ohio State has all the talent in the world, but to me, like comparing the two teams, I think they got away from them, and I think they missed it right here.
Yeah, I don't disagree that Alabama is a better team. I don't think you're going to find too many people that actually do disagree that Alabama is a better team. But unfortunately, the way they lost those two very close games are rough. And their other out-of-conference game was Texas, which they barely escaped. So,
accumulation of close competitive road games caught up with them. Because last year they had several close competitive road games against weaker opponents like Auburn and Florida. Again, this year, if Texas had played better down the stretch, that win might have mattered a lot more. But, Texas not being a top 10 team at the end of the year really hurt Alabama's chances, some things like that. We'll see if the other thing I'm curious about is how this shows up in the Heisman voting. Even though the Heisman I've always been a skeptic of it because half the people, Josh Pate at Late Kick with 24/7 Sports that has his own YouTube channel, he went on the same rant about how half of these voters no less than a sixth grader in the South or the Midwest about college football. So that because I was surprised going into this weekend, Caleb Williams was basically a 95% favorite. And 20-1 or more was Max Duggan for TCU, was Stetson Bennett for Georgia. And similar with JT Strout at Ohio State, who was the favorite until his disastrous game against Michigan, or the final score at least. I thought his odds would go down because he didn't really play a great game. I get he was banged up. They lost by 3 scores to Utah. This was not a great Utah team. They were a favorite. USC didn't score, but 1 touchdown in the final, I think 40 minutes final 30 minutes of the game. Or thereabouts. And yet the odds have not budged. And so, I think that Hendon Hooker had a good enough season to deserve to be one of the 4 that got invited. But that's the nature of the Heisman. They because of his injury, they basically scratched him. But
same with the Michigan running back as well. So.
Yeah, same Blake Corum. But I mean, Caleb Williams being a heavy favorite. If Caleb Williams wins, the Heisman is still a joke of an award. In my view, because he did not perform on the big stage. Max Duggan performed better than him. Stetson Bennett performed better than him in the biggest game that mattered the most. And I would say that if you have a little bit of money out there betting on Stetson Bennett or Max Duggan getting 20-1, 30-1 odds, depending on where you're at, probably still a decent bet because enough of the Heisman voters voted after the games, as far as I know, that it really shouldn't be a runaway for Caleb Williams. And if it is, it shows that, it's all about which program you play, not about you showing up. I mean, who did Caleb Williams beat in a big game this year? You know what I mean? I mean, he beat Oregon State because Oregon State's quarterback threw 5 picks. It wasn't because he did anything great. Lost to Utah, lost the Pac-12 title game, beat UCLA. They didn't have a defense.
Beat Notre Dame.
Beat Notre Dame. Exactly. At home. You compare it. I mean, Stetson Bennett, probably the least respect for a guy that might win back-to-back national titles. Max Duggan, I mean, that was a game effort against Kansas State. I mean, he single-handedly willed them back into that game. We need a Ginger Heisman. So I'm hoping it's not an easy win for Caleb Williams because I don't think his performance at the key junctures this year deserve it.
Well, who's the oldest Heisman winner we've ever had? That's what I want to know.
Chris Winkie.
Oh, he was like 20.
Like 28
or something.
28.
Yeah, because he played baseball. And
Stetson Bennett would be the second oldest Heisman winner ever.
Okay, because I know he's 25, so I was like, I wonder if he'd be the oldest. Chris Winkie's in there. Okay.
I think with all the losses at the end of the season, the door's really open for Bennett. I think the odds reflected that. He was a plus 6,000 at one point in time, so it dropped all the way down to 2,500 and now down to 2,000. So I think that smart money, because everybody sees him win. I think a lot of people look at that team and say, oh, well, the real Heisman player on that team is the defense, which they could be right. But given the losses and going everything Bob just said, that door's really wide open for him at this point.
Well, I mean, when is it going to come a time that we're going to start calling this a quarterback award? I mean, because that's all there is to it. It's not necessarily the best player in college football like they want it to be. I mean, because there's my thing with Stetson Bennett. How can you be the best player in college football when you're not even the best player on your own team? I understand he's a great quarterback and he can manage the game and he does those things. And I'll just say it. He's going to go down as, if not the best, one of the best quarterbacks in Georgia history. Definitely from a success standpoint, as far as wins and losses, could have 2 national championships, has an SEC championship now. So the guy's very successful and runs that offense to perfection, but he's not the best player on his own team. He probably doesn't have a real shot at playing in the pros. I mean, I think some of these guys do, but like you look at throughout college football, I mean, there's a lot of players that are very deserving that have had great seasons. That it's a quarterback award, and it's always going to be, and it's going to matter how those guys perform right there in those moments. I think Caleb Williams, he still gutted out last week. He get injured early on, still gutted out throughout the game and left it all out there on the field. Max Duggan was a gamer. I mean, I wish they could cut it in half and give half to Duggan and half to Caleb Williams, because I think those are the two that really, really do deserve it. But, like I said, I don't think that the best player in college football is going to be the person that wins this award this year.
Yeah, I mean, we did a couple years ago. Devonta Smith won, right?
They did.
As wide receiver.
The COVID year.
Derrick Henry won. But yeah, I mean, it's almost always a quarterback. We know that. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of running backs have won. I mean, the year they gave it to a defensive guy was the year they shouldn't have.
1997.
Well,
yeah,
right.
Back-to-back non-quarterback years, because in 98, Ricky Williams won it.
Well, that's because the Heisman is a bunch of voters, a bunch of media people from New York. That's who votes for the Heisman. They have no business. It shouldn't have anywhere near the prestige that it had.
I mean, a lot of one of the what's that guy's name that was you were watching? He thought Penn State was in the Big Ten title.
Boo Corrigan, he's the head of the CFP committee. This guy didn't even know who's playing in the Big Ten championship game. They put him in charge of deciding who the top 4 teams are. I don't understand that shit either.
Oh my gosh!
But one of the guys that should be up there in the Heisman, man, is talk about a Texas running back, Bijan Robinson. That he's clearly one of the best players in college football, without a doubt. And it's just a man child out there on the field. Is going to be a great pro, in my opinion. And that guy didn't even get to sit in the room. You got Stetson Bennett there and said, look, I know Stetson Bennett has done great things in his offense and with that team, but you can't sit and tell me that Stetson Bennett is a better football player than Bijan Robinson. I just am never going to buy that.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. This is the first Heisman year where I look at it and I'm like, I have no idea who should win this thing.
It's the most wide open it's been in a long time.
Yeah, it's a really weird one this year for sure.
But it should be. But the Vegas odds are the most lopsided they've been in years.
Yeah. We'll certainly see what happens. The people who vote for it, as we've seen a lot of these things, the people who end up voting for these things are the least qualified people to vote for them. Same thing. We have similar problems with, say, Major League Baseball Hall of Fame voting, where you have these people who are so out of touch with the game, people who refuse to actually vote for someone because of, this guy fucking 50 years ago didn't get on the first ballot, so I can't vote for someone on the first ballot for that reason. A lot of kind of these things going on for the sports writers of America at times, but not too much action in college football this week. But certainly next week we're going to have probably some bowl game previews and stuff like that, betting to talk to you guys about as we get closer to those. But we do thank you guys for joining us here in the chat. We appreciate the hell out of you. And again, Cricket and Cody, appreciate you guys taking the time and coming by. It's been good to see you. We missed you for a couple weeks, but now we are back. And Robert, where can people find all of the picks at Sports Picks?
Yeah, and up tomorrow night, we'll have a World Cup preview video with Cody and my brother to break down the quarterfinal matchups Friday and Saturday. So it'll be up Thursday night. And if you want good picks, high quality, I mean, we're up profit rate over 50% again this year, more double our money last year. It's the most effective investment you can make. For $10 a month, you can make 50% rate of return. Not a lot of places where you can get that. And that's where you can get it, sportspicks.locals.com. You also get tons of free information and free picks, recaps and reviews on everything, college basketball, NBA, college football, NFL, soccer, you name it. NHL. There's other handicappers that give out their picks and their analysis and their advice. You get to interact with the community and post your own material. So it's a great sports handicapping community at sportspicks.locals.com.
There you go. Absolutely. So thank you guys. We'll be back here next week at the same time. Talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Can't wait.